TYT Community here on the TYT Network, the show panel by members and fans of the Young Turks. I want to thank everyone for tuning into the live stream here. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. With me today, joining me is Nick, Sean, Jordan, and guest panelist, LGBT activist Becca Moore from Team Rainbow Dress. Welcome, everybody, to the show. God damn it, Sean. Anyway, why don't you guys say hi to our viewers?
Hello there.
Okay, all right. That's
Greetings.
All right, so
No one else wants to say hi.
I know that's weird, but okay. So anyway, awkwardness out of the way. We're gonna get started with the show. Once again, I want to thank everybody here for joining us on the live stream. For those of you watching this live, we really appreciate it. If you don't want to watch this live, of course, there's clips on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TYTNation. So let's get started, man. Great stories today. And we're going to start out with a little bit of a controversy going on in San Francisco. Now, lawmakers in San Francisco recently approved something called Laura's Law, which allows the forced treatment of the mentally ill under certain circumstances. Now, the law was named after 19-year-old Laura Wilcox, who was shot and killed by a mentally ill patient in Nevada County Behavioral Health Clinic, where she was working as an intern. Now, Raw Story explains that if this law gets final approval and gets signed by the governor, it would allow court-ordered outpatient treatment for people with chronic and severe mental illness. Now, that's mental illness that's deemed a risk to themselves or others. One of the other conditions is that they have to be or had to have been jailed or hospitalized more than once within the prior 3 years. Now, the law also allows family members, police officers, or mental health professionals to petition the court to request that a mentally ill person be mandated to get treatment. So, the obvious question here is, who decides, right? Who decides who's going to get treatment? Well, the law would appoint a three-person panel to decide each case. Included in this panel would be a forensic psychologist that would review the case to determine if this mandate is necessary. Now, there's another part of the law that health officials offer voluntary treatment first before being allowed to get a mandate if the panel deems necessary. Now, obviously, you can see why this bill would be a little bit controversial because it has the effect, or could have the effect, of taking away somebody's civil rights. And many patient advocacy groups are criticizing the bill on those grounds. Now, one of those critics is the executive director of the Mental Health Association of San Francisco, who has said that, quote, "There's no real doubt that this is a process that fosters stigma around mental illness." So I'm a little torn on this. On one hand, these people do need help, but won't get it themselves, will finally get it, and maybe get better and stay out of prison. On the other hand, there is the danger of this being abused. And of course, there's that issue with stigmatization of the mentally ill or of mental illness and the obvious problems with civil rights. Now, I want to go to my panel and get your thoughts on this law's proposal that's looking very, very likely to pass in San Francisco. Now, it has passed California in the state, but the counties are able to adopt it, and so far only one county has. So I want to get your guys' thoughts. Let's go with our civil liberties expert, Sean. Sean, what do you think about this whole thing?
I was like, is he really going to go to me as an expert? Turns out he did. I'm actually probably against this bill. It breaks one of my #1 rules about American politics, and that is naming a law after a victim, because usually when that happens, a whole bunch of stupid shit gets crammed into the law. Like, we all understand that certain mentally ill people need to undergo treatment, and sometimes their mental illness prevents them from being able to make that decision to go under treatment, but you can't take away due process and substitute it with a panel of 3 experts. Like, that's not the way it works. I'm totally against this, and the only bill that should be named after a person should be the Sean Fitzgerald No More Naming Bills After Victims Act.
All right, so let's go to let's go to you, Nick. What do you think about this?
I'm a little torn on this too, but I'm probably going to side with Sean on it as well. The idea of involuntary treatment at any point in time, even if it is helpful, and I mean, it is difficult because it does have to come to a panel for review, and I guess the challenge would be where's the line at? Where is the point where they can determine whether or not they are in their right minds to refuse or accept treatment? That, I think, is the big sticking point. As for the whole thing about it might further stigmatize mental illness, I don't see how that's even remotely possible to further stigmatize mental illness. Mental illness is already very heavily stigmatized, even if not overtly, at least subversively, to the point where you don't really want to see or approach mentally ill people that you don't really know or understand on any public transportation, or if they're homeless or anything, because you don't know them or how they'll react. So that is already there. I don't see how the forced treatment notion would make that worse. But that shouldn't be the sticking point out of this at all, because like I said, I'm with Sean on this. The idea of forced treatment is, I think that's crossing a line.
Well, okay, so here's a question. What do you consider forced treatment?
That is a good question. If the person is deemed capable of making their own decisions and refusing or accepting treatment, as in if they're recognized legally as being able to do that, and they're still forced treatment, then that's crossing a line. The challenge is, where is that line? Where does that fall? And that you need, I'd assume, a lot of professional examiners to determine what their mental state is at and whether or not they can safely make that decision for themselves. But it's very tricky. It needs a lot. It needs to be. They need to tread this line very, very carefully. And I'm kind of with Sean. Bills that are named after people, I don't think they usually do tread carefully. So I think it's a little too reactionary. I don't think it's quite as well thought out as it should be.
Okay, so Sean, are you aware that actually that there is a version of this law in New York, Kendra's law, right? That was instituted back in 1999, and apparently, according to some of the statistics from Kendra's law, that's actually been a success in reducing hospitalizations, suicides, violence to self and others, arrests, and incarceration. And so where the line is that it's really for people who are very drastic cases. And another couple of important points to remember is that medication, like when it comes to medication is not forced. So I just want to let you guys know that like if you're forcing people to take medication like on the street or something like that, that's horrible. That's crosses the line, right? But so that's not in there, okay? And another thing to remember, another important point, is that it is cheaper to administer to get these people who have already been arrested and hospitalized due to their mental illness, right? Instead of sending them to prison, they could get treatment. So that's where I'm like, that's where I agree with this. So, and there's a lot of support for this law and for laws like these from relatives of people with severe mental illness, so that they can actually get them the help they need. So, there's those points to consider. Jordan, let's have you weigh in, and then we'll go to Becca.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that thing I do where I disagree with everybody. Jeff, you and I are on the same side, I think, but I do want to take issue with what you said about like bringing cost into this. Whenever it comes to civil rights, I don't think cost should be part of that conversation. Like civil rights have to trump cost. Now, I get in this particular instance, maybe that line's a little grayer because we're either throwing them in jail or forcing them to get treatment. So either way, they're in a bad situation. So then it's like, okay, well, so of the two bad situations, maybe then you can factor cost. I don't know. Certainly it's better than throwing them in jail. But then I want to take issue with like a lot of what Sean said, and not just because Sean said it, because a lot of it was just bad. But the whole idea, like he said, like, oh, 3 people determining your fate is not due process. That's not what this law is. Like that panel or whatever is a part of the process in this whole thing. Sean just kind of like almost death paneled the conversation there. But these people, they have to have a history. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm repeating you here, Jeff. I know you read this, but they have to have had run-ins with the law. There has to have been behavior that caused harm to others or to themselves. And I'm a little bit shaky on the harm to yourself. I know it's a complicated thing because they are mentally ill, and we do have to sometimes protect people from themselves. I get that, but the harm to others thing, we've at least got to be in agreement there. Like, that's a problem. That's a public health issue. And so, I mean, and then I want to close with, on this show, I mean, I haven't been on the show for a while, but even like whenever I was on the show in the past, we've done stories about how the police can't handle mentally ill people and the injustice that they face at the hands of police and get killed because we just basically made being mentally ill a crime. Like, to me, this is a step in the right direction as long as it's done right, as long as these people have due process and it's not abused and it doesn't just become the old institutional system again. But it's better than sending cops who see every problem as a nail and every gun as a hammer, to come handle mentally ill people. If we can get them help, then let's get them help, man.
Yeah, those are a lot of good points. All right, so Becca, let's go to you. Get your thoughts.
Okay. So some of the supporting material on this original story said, just sort of generically, that studies show that AOT, that's assisted outpatient treatment, drastically reduces, and it lists the whole rehospitalization, lengths of hospital stays, arrests, incarceration, suicide attempts, victimization, and violent behavior. So, being an academic, I went to hunt down the original study that said this. And found this review from the Canadian Journal of Psychiatry from Schwartz and Swanson. Data's a little old, it's from 2004. But it looks like where they're getting that study show is from the Duke Mental Health Study, which does indeed show a decrease in all of these. But Schwartz and Swanson argue that, in fact, what the data would show is that enhanced services, and I'm quoting from them now, enhanced services and not coercion per se are the appropriate system response. So, coming back to the original measure, if we want to address some of these civil rights issues, the argument seems to be that, in fact, it's the increased access to services generally, not that people are being forced to use them, that seem to be making the most difference. And so I wonder if there's a solution that lies more in, okay, these people are already in the system. When they come through that first time, make sure they're getting this increased access. Don't wait until someone brings up a new concern.
Yeah, I think I can definitely agree with that. Getting them help the first time that they go in seems like it would be a sensible thing, but I don't know. Does anybody else have anything to add, or should we move on?
Look, I just want to throw in that, look, I'm in favor of people getting mental treatment, and I think that you go to judges. Like, I'm in favor of that 72-hour hold that most states have, that if you think it's an emergency situation, they'll wait you for 3 days, and then it has to go before a judge. It's just I'm a little uneasy because some of these people are in jail for sure, or going to go to jail for sure, but some of them are on the street with a history of mental illness, and you don't know if they're functioning or not. Like, I feel like laws that are named after people tend to have things in there that are passed that wouldn't normally be passed without that, it's named after a victim, don't vote against the victim. So I feel like it could turn out to, take away people's freedoms that don't really deserve it. And that's my concern about the bill. Not to, do what Jordan said and death panel the discussion.
All right. Unless anybody has anything to add against Sean. All right. So we'll move on to our next story. Kind of a little bit more of a fun story. Not dealing so much with mental. Well, you could probably argue that this guy might suffer from some sort of mental problem. Anyway. Kentucky State Senator Brandon Smith isn't too happy with the EPA regulations proposed by the Obama administration. Like many Republicans, he doesn't believe climate change is an issue or even a real thing. Why? Well, let's listen to him make his argument to the Committee on Natural Resources and Environment.
I don't see you as being one of the enemies. I know you've got a very tough job to do, but as you sit there in your chair with your data, we sit up here in ours with our data and the constituents and stuff behind us. I don't want to get into the debate about the climate change, but I will just simply point out that I think in academia we all agree that the temperature on Mars is exactly as it is here. Nobody will dispute that, yet there are no coal mines on Mars. There's no factories on Mars that I'm aware of. So I think what we're looking at is something much greater than what we're going to do.
So, wait a minute. All of academia agrees that the temperatures on Mars are exactly the same as here? No. Dude, just no. Look, the average temperature on Mars is about negative 81 degrees Fahrenheit. Look, this is a good example of the problem with elected Republicans. They don't even understand science. Because if they did, they would actually know what the temperature of Mars is. And that pumping huge amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere will actually throw off the balance of our climate. And it would cause some rather uncomfortable changes. Oh, did I also mention that this guy owns a coal mine? Coincidence? I think not. So, real quick, I'm going to ask to the panel, what do you guys think about this guy? Isn't this guy amazing?
Yeah, I want to go first on this one. So, that was probably one of the funniest things I've ever heard anyone say about anything ever. That Mars and Earth are the exact same temperature. Never mind the whole thing about CO2 emissions and that stuff affecting temperature. Just on the basis of the fact that the Mars is further away from the sun than Earth, it's colder. End of discussion. That's all you need. Even if it had an atmosphere and was still pumping CO2 emissions, it would still be colder than Earth. End of story. The fact that this guy, oh my God, it's so ridiculous. It's so insanely ridiculous. I can't believe he actually said that with a straight face and didn't like, holy crap. And then there was another comment from a similar lawmaker about dinosaurs, that the Earth adjusted. Yeah, the Earth will adjust through this too. That's not the problem. The problem is, will we survive to endure the adjustments? That's the catching point, and the estimates aren't looking good for us. That's what matters. We're not going to obliterate our atmosphere. The planet will adjust in that sense. What we are going to do is make it uninhabitable for us. That's what the problem is.
Yeah, pretty much nailed it there. Becca, what do you think?
I actually was going to say that dinosaur extinction quotation that was also in the article was one of my favorites, because exactly, an entire system going extinct would indeed be a problem for humans. I also wanted to respond to, in the same discussion, Representative Stanley, who does not deserve the name, made a claim that there actually hadn't been global warming. However, the International Panel on Climate Change said each of the last 3 decades has been successively warmer than any previous decade before 1850. We also have unprecedented concentrations of greenhouse gases not seen in over 800,000 years, which is before the advent of anatomically modern humans. So trying to say that climate change naturally happens, sure, but equating our contributions to the previous natural occurrences is just bad science. And as was just made very clear, has a lot to do with not actually paying attention to any of the science. And it would be funny if they weren't the people in power, which instead to me makes it kind of terrifying.
Agreed. Sean?
Well, I mean, his comments are ridiculous for 3 reasons. but I just want to get to the first one. Obviously, there's no coal mines on Mars. They've already advanced to some kind of crystallic fusion type power, and that's why they don't use coal anymore. But more importantly, like I've actually heard this talking point said correctly in another way, and he didn't even get that. Usually, what skeptics, quote unquote skeptics, say is that Mars is warming at the same rate as Earth, controlled for all these factors. Like that's the actual talking point. It's not true, but that's the actual talking point. And then they say it's because the sun is the primary cause of global warming and all that. Like he wasn't even smart enough to get that out there. He's like, nope, same temperature. Red planet, blue planet. I stuck a thermometer in the ground. Like, so if you're going to be skeptical, if you're going to go against like global warming, like at least read like more than like the cover of or the headline of the skeptical article that you're supposed to be quoting. Like the whole point of that, and you could look it up. It's the rate of increase proportional to the distance. There's a more scientifically sound way to make stuff up about Earth and Mars than this guy did, and that's the most troubling part. He's not even smart enough to lie correctly.
Boom. All right, Jordan.
Well, I want to point out what everybody else is missing, like the real just absurdity to this guy's statement, more so than claiming that Mars is the same temperature as Earth and no one debates that, is that he didn't say that in academia there's no debate that. He said that we in academia, meaning this man who thinks Earth is the same temperature as Mars, called himself part of academia. Why are we not pointing that out? This guy is crazy, man. And then now I want to also kind of to shift the conversation just a little bit here, point out that, like, yeah, obviously there's a financial motive in this particular instance, but you know, there's that great quote about, oh gosh, I'm going to totally mess up who it's attributed to. I want to say it's Neil deGrasse Tyson, but pointing out, you know, you look at the legislatures and the people who run our country, and it's businessmen and lawyers, and that's basically it. There's no scientists, there's no engineers, there's no, you know, all that. You know, Democrats are an example of this too. You guys remember a few years ago whenever Hank Johnson, who, as far as I know, does not have a financial interest in steadying islands, but was afraid that if we shipped troops to Guam, Guam would tip over because he thought that's how islands work. Like, these are the people writing our laws. And so, like, sometimes it's because they have a financial interest in it. Sometimes it's just because we let people come to power who have no scientific education because we don't value fact and the scientific method in this country as we do opinion. And I realize I'm saying that as the religious person on the panel, but it's still true. Like, it's crazy how much power
it's a great amount of
we give to
right
stupid people.
It's a great amount of irony.
The irony level is over 9,000.
That Hank Johnson interview, or that Hank Johnson YouTube clip is one of the greatest things ever. He asked an admiral if the island will capsize because he believes islands float. Probably the dumbest Democrat in the Congress, but not as dumb.
Yeah, that's the problem, man. We elect stupid people because apparently you have to be really stupid and bought to run. It's really amazing. How low can you go, right? America.
Well, part of the problem is you got. I mean, this is the same problem that societies have had throughout history, with as far dealing strictly with the elected officials thing, not with global warming. But that, I mean, Schenck often cites that one thing about like a third of when the United States first declared its independence, a third fought, a third were neutral, and a third fought for the British. And that's actually a decent example of the basic breakdown of every single society in human history is. I mean, I think Voltaire did it best in his book Candide, where at the end he basically has the guy, one person's trying to say God's did all these terrible things to the character throughout the book, and he's like, no, I don't even care about that. I'm just going to cultivate my own damn garden right now. And you got people like that who aren't really interested in greater politics, who aren't really interested in anything about around their immediate lives, who politics on the local, state, and federal level are. just kind of like minor inconveniences they have to do every couple of years. So what do? They like to brush it off, or they don't really pay too much attention to it. I know people up here in Canada do the same thing. A good friend of mine didn't give a shit who she voted for mayor, and now we're kind of paying for it. But so you've always had those types of people. The challenge is to try and balance it out so you have more people engaged and involved in the political aspect, while not diminishing the other realms that are also important. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to care more about your more immediate life or things other than the greater good of society, but you still have to care a bit.
All right, and I want to leave it there. That's a great note to end this segment on. And we're going to head over to Fox and Friends. Full of excitement. The Fox and Friends continues the proud tradition of giving terrible advice to women. Watch.
So when it comes to women, you have some do's and don'ts. Some of the do's: wear simple statement clothes, well-cut jeans with a colorful top.
I'm under fire for it too. Focusing too much on looks, people say that women shouldn't be so focused about what we look like and what we're wearing,
Yes.
but what our mind can do, what our
Exactly.
voice can do.
And that's why it's so comforting. 70% of leaders out there are saying that gravitas, figuring out how to signal, how to telegraph that you know your stuff cold. That you're 3 questions deep on your field of expertise is the way to go. And how do you get that across? Communication skills, amazingly important these days. And you've got to be concise, and you've got to be very compelling.
Also, a little thing that you think is important is your presentation and your voice.
Yes.
Keep it low, don't speak loud.
Right, under stress.
For women.
Well, men too.
You say to look active and fill silence with words. What do those two things mean?
Well, I interviewed a lot of women from the South, for instance. They oftentimes are brought up to fill the air with words. That's been a good hostess. But oftentimes that undermines you, just rambling. So again, create some space. Be very thoughtful and intentional.
Don't talk too much.
Exactly. But know what you're putting out there that's value added to the conversation, right? An enormously important thing.
So, yeah, don't talk too much. Keep your voice down. Okay, so I agree with some of the points that women shouldn't be so focused on what they look like and what they're wearing and what their mind can do, and instead focusing on what their mind can do. That's great. Well, here's Kilmeade saying, got to keep your voice down. Look, he's pretty much saying, know your place. Don't project your voice. Only men should do that. Men are leaders. If women do that, they're bossy and shrill. And, of course, they need to talk less. Now, it's a double standard to me that kind of dates back to the 1950s. Now, I'm sure their 70-plus-year-old audience just eats it up. Yeah, uppity women need to be quiet. I remember when they talked less and didn't raise their voices. Yeah, we should go back to that. Now, look, to be honest, I don't think this woman was coming bad at it from a bad place. I mean, she's just trying to give tips, right, in the workplace. I'm not nitpicking her advice too much. I'm really kind of going after the idiots, Kilmeade and Ducey, jumping in with their, men don't need to keep their voice. It's women. Women have to do it. Yep, under pressure, women need to shut up. That's not exactly what she said. But anyway, I want to get your guys' thoughts on this segment, on some of these do's and don'ts. And we'll start with you, Becca.
Okay, thank you. First, exactly what you just said, because I really don't feel like Professor Hewlett, who is incidentally a professor of economics at Columbia University, none of the reviews that I could find of this book said anything about it being about what women should or should not do. Some of them said she gave advice to both women and men, indicating that perhaps there was a gendered element to her advice, but it seemed like she was coming at it from more of a sociological perspective than a basic gender difference perspective. But you're absolutely right. Ducey and Kilmeade are jumping in on top of her saying, oh, well, if you're a woman. And in fact, in a part that wasn't in that clip, she said something about a big struggle for men being to be more empathetic and to show empathy for the people they're speaking to. And Kilmeade jumps in and adds to that, but show you're really a man. Nothing that she was saying had anything to do with that, and instead they're taking it and twisting it to fit this gender narrative, like their Princeton Mom segment that's now infamous. That isn't what the professor's saying at all. I wish she had done more to combat that. I wish she had been more assertive in that way. But in fact, what she's saying isn't about, oh, women need to be more quiet. What she's saying is what makes a good executive presence, and in fact, it's the title of her book. And they instead twist the whole narrative to fit into this angry feminist narrative. It was infuriating to watch, because she's written a book about how to help women become better leaders. I think that would tie in quite nicely with that Atlantic piece on the confidence gap, which you can find just by Googling that, but I know a lot of people have read. What she's saying seems to be more about addressing that confidence gap, not doing the exact opposite by falling into prescribed gender roles. And I'm going to stop there before I get too angry about it. Hand it back to you all.
You know, I think that you pretty much nailed it there, Becca. That was excellent commentary. Jordan, let's go to you. Let's get your thoughts on Ducey and Joe Mead.
Man, all right, how ready was Ducey to jump in that conversation? I mean, you just see it the whole interview. He's leaning forward more and more and more, and you think he really wants to contribute. And then when he finally speaks, he says, "Not talk so much." He was so excited to say that women shouldn't talk so much and have a woman, quote unquote, agree with him. He was just pumped, man, like a little kid who's being told a story for the first time. He's ready for it. This is an example of. It's similar to the whole a lot of the way we treat rape, with the blaming the victim kind of mentality. The fact of the matter is, the stuff that they're saying here is a little bit. There's some truth to it. It is easier for women to be liked in the workplace or whatever if they don't do these things. But that's because men are pigs and the workplace is slanted towards men. That doesn't mean women should then bow to that. To that injustice there, and what we need to be doing is writing books about men, or writing books to men that say, hey, when a woman wants to speak, maybe you should listen to her the same way you would listen to a man who said the exact same thing, and we've seen all sorts of these PSAs and studies that show when a girl does it, you call it this, when a guy does it, you call it this, that's what we need to be addressing. It's one thing to acknowledge this reality for women. As a matter of fact, I think that's the first step. Because you have to acknowledge the injustice to fix it. But then to go out and write books saying, okay, so there's this problem, you should totally do it, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll get a slightly better paying job out of it. But women everywhere, for generation after generation, will have to keep kowtowing to it. That's ridiculous, man. That's not the way to go about solving this.
All right, Sean.
Go to Nick first.
All right, Nick, go ahead.
Yay!
Apparently somebody wasn't ready.
Finally. I wanted to say something for a while. First off, let me start by saying there's this hilarious clip I saw years ago, and it's a satire clip. It's a joke clip. It was put out by the BBC. It's called "Women Know Your Place." It's this black and white sort of 40s, 50s kind of look to it. And it starts with this couple at a dinner party. They're all having a good laugh, and it's but notice how the conversation suddenly turns seriously. They all have a laugh, and then they suddenly stop, and the men start talking about local politics and things. And then it's now notice these men talking about local politics and stuff. Now watch this woman. She's about to make a terrible mistake, and she starts out and she offers an opinion about it, and then the men just look at her so disgustedly. It's a funny little parody because it's treating them like they're completely different species when it's really funny, but in the sense that it's so terrible and completely satirical that it's funny. But yeah, that's about all I had to say. I had something to say about Jordan, but then what he said about his points were, but I lost it in trying to tell that funny story. Sorry.
All right.
I can go ahead and tell you what he was going to say. He was going to say, "Yeah, Jordan, that's absolutely right. That's brilliant." So I remember for you.
You are right about a lot of it. Don't get me wrong with that. There was I had a point. It was to contribute, to add on to it, and I don't know what it was. I'm sorry.
All right, Sean, go ahead.
Yeah,
Take us home.
Becca kind of stole a little bit of my thunder. I was going to talk about how this woman that they were interviewing wasn't like promoting like male chauvinism or anything. Like she was like giving advice, and like the Fox News host kind of ran over her on that. Like her advice is actually like, from like sociological factors and stuff like that. Like to give you like a comparable example, if you're ever on trial, they always tell you to wear a light blue shirt. So because that conveys honesty more than red. Ironically, I'm wearing red today, so I'm lying. But yeah, so that like she was giving out advice like that. Like she wasn't saying that you should know your role and stuff like that. And even when she was saying don't fill the air with words, like it was just saying like don't feel the need to talk when it's not like needed. Like she's more like, you know, make your concise points and stuff like that. It wasn't like don't talk so much, as excited as Ducey got. There's like another part of that clip that we couldn't show because of the foul language. It's when they cut to commercial break, and Kilme's like, I don't know what this bitch is babbling about, and then they come back to the air. That was supposed to be funny.
It's supposed to be, but
yeah, like
fail.
the amusing part about that clip, and it's besides of what they say and how they run over this woman and how they like twist her book and make her somebody who's trying to help women, they make her into a villain for women by going so over the top in this clip, is that there's a female host on the show, and you literally hear no words from her throughout the majority of the segment. So they're actually like doing the things that they're saying, like they're not letting their female host talk and all that. So I found that amusing and a little bit like irony.
Right. I just want to end it out
Other
by
than
saying
like the
that,
5 or 6 words she said at the start, which Sean apparently
Right.
missed because he's bad Sean. Oh yeah, I remember what I was gonna say. I was oh my god, it's gone again. No. Workplace. Right. I got it. Okay. I was gonna say that Jordan's point was absolutely right. That there does need to be a lot more attention on how men sort of treat women in the workplace. With that said, I don't know if it's just my generation now or the generation of Sean and I and us younger folk, you guys too, that feels like less and less of an issue for us. I haven't seen anything that's so blatantly, clearly sexist in my work environment. Now, granted, there are, of course, still the problems of, like, I think men seem to be more open about talking about female coworkers and wanting to engage in sexual intercourse with them. To be fair, though, I've also heard several female coworkers wanting to do that as well about the men. So I'm wondering if our generation is getting better at it. Or maybe it's just a generational thing. It's slowly dying off and it's getting better. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything about it and we shouldn't continue to work at it. But I'm wondering if we're actually making progress, and like noticeable progress.
Right.
We
back
totally
into-
are, Nick. The pay gap between men and women is actually a little bit less, and in some areas gone in our generation. But at the same time, I do want to point out right now we're doing a panel show with 4 men and 1 woman. And let's keep it real, having 1 woman tonight puts us ahead of our usual trend. So I think it's certainly a lot less intentional and a closer to harmless. But, I mean, we've still got a ways to go.
Yeah, and Jordan, I'm going to go over to Becca to take us home. End the segment out.
Oh no, see, now I'm being put on the spot because of my gender, and I can only fill the silence with words. No, I think that we've summarized the issue really nicely, though. Essentially, we had a woman who is in a position of power, actually, and is trying to tell other women how to achieve that position of power, and instead they twisted her advice to tend it towards powerlessness, to tend it towards voicelessness. And it's frustrating, but that's sort of what Fox and Friends does, in my opinion. So that's where I'll leave it.
Right. It's just Fox and Friends being Fox and Friends. All right. So next segment, we're going to go to some economic news. Hey. Now, in the most ironic comment of the day, the millionaire CEO of CKE Restaurants, Andy Pudster, told everyone working under him that for minimum wage is that paying them more money is going to hurt them more than help them. How? Well, he used the usual debunked talking points, that it will create significantly higher prices, increase automation, and lead to more youth unemployment. Now, what's the solution? Oh, you'll love this. Now, he told Yahoo Finance that government, just needs to get out of the way. Quote, if government gets out of the way, business will create jobs and wages will go up. Just like that. Magically, jobs will just fall from the sky, from the magic job fairy. Look, basically he argues for getting rid of the minimum wage, which I guess is too high for him, despite him making about $4.4 million in 2012, according to Forbes. Now, that's only about 291 times the average Hardee's and Carl's Jr. worker. Not so bad, right? But no, he says a higher minimum wage attracts adults willing to flip burgers instead of work other jobs. Yes, because flipping burgers is fucking awesome. If only it paid more. Shit, if it did, I'd be like, fuck this job. I'm going to go work at McDonald's. Bullshit. Look, we all know the facts here. More adults are working in fast food and retail because that's essentially all we have left. Right? We don't really make anything here anymore in America. 44% of job gains over the last 4 years were all low-wage jobs. We have a huge workforce. We don't have enough jobs. And of those jobs, we don't have enough good jobs. But hey, despite the facts about that, which this guy obviously doesn't care about, there's another reason he's opposed to minimum wage laws. And it's not because they think they'll hurt you. No. They'll hurt him. Bottom line. But look, although at a $4.4 million salary from 2012, it doesn't really look like he's hurting all that much. This is just him trying to cut his costs. Trying to cut his costs even more so he can make more profit. The biggest cost of a business is paying your employees. And this guy is essentially saying, look, if I could pay my people less, I would. He's not looking out for you or the young people who need jobs. And if you think so, I think you might need to get your head examined. All right, what do you guys think about this guy?
I want to jump in on. I'd like to jump in on this first. Sorry, it reminds me of the kind of sort of rich stereotype of someone who's like, you don't want this luxurious lifestyle or this comfortable lifestyle. I mean, look at how hard it is to live comfortably. I mean, it's so difficult to, and then they'll do some really extravagant sort of example of something that they think is hard, but it's like like something poor people would love to do. I'm sure there's various cartoons about it. You could look it up, or satirical skits about it. It's a classic sort of skit or a comedic strategy. But yeah, it's almost like it's comedic. It almost is, except he's serious. That's what's amazing. He's dead serious in saying that you can't have living money. It would hurt you. It would hurt you. It would enter your life and it would leave an empty hole when it left. It's like I can't believe him.
Money
of course
is for me, but not for thee. Yeah. Right? That's pretty much how it is.
Unfortunately, yeah. Meanwhile, the companies that are paying their workers more are doing better, and the workers who are getting paid more are buying more, which is driving the economy. Somehow seems to be lost on these wealthier types, apparently. Certain wealthier types, not all. And I'll leave it at that.
Right. Well, you forget that, trickle-down tends to work more for them. And that's what they focus on. Well, it works for me. Who cares about everybody else?
But here's the thing.
I'm getting paid.
Sorry, here's the thing. I'm sure that if the economy was booming and everyone was getting a living wage and they were buying goods, it wouldn't hurt their bottom line in the end. It would be a short-term dent. But I guarantee you that if everyone had enough money to buy the goods, they would do so much better. Everyone, including the business owners. So,
Jordan, jump in, man.
Okay, yeah, I'll jump in.
Looks like a deer in the headlights.
You said a lot of. Sorry, I had to reach over and unmute the hardware. Yeah, you said a lot of what I wanted to say. So there's going to be this threat of older employees, more qualified employees coming after your job if we raise the minimum wage. Jeff pointed it out, that's because we no longer have a production-based economy. We have a service-based economy with a lot of IT thrown in. And until we get away from a service-based economy, there's nothing you can do. Like, people are going to come to those jobs because it's what's there. But the other thing I want to point out, though, too, is it's similar to the whole rising tide lifts all ships kind of thing that Nick has pointed out and that other economists have pointed out, and that the article that I believe you covered last week on the show, the millionaire or billionaire writing about raising the wage pointed out. But the other thing is, if people leave these what are traditionally seen as better jobs to come work in fast food, then what that would mean then, if we're going to let's accept his argument at its face and say it's true, then that means that better jobs are opening up for young people who can bring innovation to those jobs and reignite the economy. So, like, even if what he was saying is true, or even if what he was saying was true, which is probably not, it's still not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I don't get his point. And this is a guy who's just like, it's the feudal mentality of CEOs right now, man. Like, the idea that companies invest in their people and that everyone should take pride in their work, and employees should be thankful for their jobs, and employers should be thankful for their employees, that's gone. And we've got this mentality now where it's like, not only are you lording it, over these people that you get to give them jobs or whatever, but you think that they shouldn't be grateful, like that's their duty. They owe it to you to work for next to nothing while you squeeze production out of them. And I mean, man, you want to talk about what's killing the economy? If that's not it, then I don't know what is. And Nick's absolutely right. And I want to kind of get finished with one point about kind of the less tangible aspect of this. So obviously, if you pay, if you build from the middle out and you pay your workers a decent wage, they have more money to spend. But you also get a better experience at these businesses as a customer, because people care more about their jobs whenever you pay them well, and they do their jobs better, and they enjoy their jobs more. You can have someone do the same thing, and they will like it more if you pay them more, and they'll do it better. And I know that because I've experienced it firsthand. And it's just, this guy, but he doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about the customer experience. He doesn't care about his employees. He just cares about taking care of himself, and that's it.
And here to disagree with pretty much half of what we said is Sean.
Yes. Yeah, so like his article is not even that questionable. He says if you raise the cost of labor, then you're going to hurt little kids or teenagers. Forget little kids, like teenagers looking for work, which is obviously true. When you raise the minimum wage, younger people have a harder time getting jobs. That's why when every liberal sends me how Australia's minimum wage is $15, I send them back how they actually have a lower wage when you're 15, and it gradually goes up than what we have in the United States, because they're smart enough to recognize that a high minimum wage hurts low-skilled workers who disproportionately turn out to be young. Also, like, the idea that they won't try to go more towards automation if the cost of labor goes up is, like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I see those automatic checkout things at the supermarket, and they're only in a few supermarkets because it turns out if you have automatic checkout, you're more likely to be stolen from as a store. But if you raise the cost of a cashier's wage, and that offsets what you would lose from having the machine do the cashier's job, then eventually you're going to raise it to a certain point where they're going to just say fuck it, and they're going to go with the cashier, they're going to fire 7 cashiers, have automatic checkout, and hire like 2 security guards. Like, that's usually what happens. If the cost of something goes up, you look for different ways to get rid of that cost. Ironically, this guy in particular is a owner of a large-scale company, and large-scale companies are actually way better off when it comes to minimum wage increases because they have bigger economies of scale. So it's actually not going to affect him as much as he pretends it will. But in general,
I just want to address that point about automation, Sean. There's only so much you can automate until people say, I really don't want to go to your store because there's no fucking people here, right? So there's only and look, you can automate checkout, sure. you're not going to automate the guy sitting in the drive-through. Okay? Like, yeah, they have the speaker and everything, but you're really going to have to, you're really going to have somebody be replaced by a robot who's handing you your food?
Can I just jump in here quickly?
Yeah.
I just want to say something.
I don't see
I
it.
just want to point out one thing. In certain drive-thrus, they are experimenting where they transmit your order to India, and they actually take your order in India and they put it through the computer. So you're talking to a person. It's just not an American person. Like that's.
I was just about to say it.
Sean, see, I kind of disagree with your point about that raising the minimum wage hurts young people. Of course, my example is anecdotal, but up in Canada, our nationwide minimum wage is now $11. Our teenagers don't really have any trouble finding work, and it's been raising steadily by like a quarter of a dollar every couple of years. I mean, it's not much, it's not enough still. We need to raise it more, but teenagers are still getting hired here somehow because there's still a market for young workers to do the jobs that other people don't want to do, because we still have a decent economy. We have your American dream up here, as that one story kind of alluded to earlier, and that I like to remind the panelists every now and then. But
more like rub it in our face.
But we have a decent economy, so when our minimum wage goes up, like it's kind of I think it's almost mandatory. I think at times that it rises every now and then. But our young people don't have any trouble finding jobs with that. They're not screwed out of jobs in that sense. However, maybe that's because it's nationwide, and maybe if it's with the regional element, it's different. But isn't that then an argument for a bigger, a higher nationwide and flat minimum wage rate in America? Because we seem to be doing fine with that.
All right, is Becca here? Because I'd like to go to her. Becca?
Oh, okay. I was gonna let Sean respond, but I'm here and I have data. So
Excellent. Lay it on us.
I see the argument that it could in some ways hurt teen jobs, except that minimum wage jobs aren't primarily belonging to teenagers right now. That's just not what's happening. So as far as current actual minimum wage, it's only 1.6 million Americans. That's only 2% of hourly workers. But if you then fill in the gap between that and the proposed $10.10 minimum wage, then you're up to over 17 million hourly workers, which is, of course, a little over 10%. Like you've substantially increased the percent of hourly workers that we're talking about. Of that larger group, more than half of them are over 30. More than half of them work full-time. Only 13% of them are teenagers. So if only 13% of these jobs even currently belong to teenagers, we might be missing what the conversation should really be about. It should be about the majority of people holding these jobs, not the teenagers for whom, and this is making a generalization, but for most of whom having this job is not going to mean the difference between being able to feed their children, between having a living wage or not. So it comes down to who actually has these jobs, not just, okay, maybe it does make it harder for teenagers, but that's not who we're really talking about. And, lest I be misconstrued, I also think that the minimum wage it's not really about helping the poor, it's about fairness. And we are part of several international coalitions based on fairness of wage, fairness of working conditions, and this makes us out to be hypocrites.
All right, so let's get, Jordan, you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, just again, a thumbs up to a lot of what Becca said. And I want to kind of respond to Sean here and go, this also kind of goes back to my point from the last story, that this is like about the difference in accepting a problem and advising people to work within the confines of that existing problem or fixing the problem. And Sean's right, man. Right now, the corporate mentality is to squeeze the most productivity out of the fewest amount of people for the least amount of pay. And that is the problem, right? So Sean is right. Like with a lot of the mentality right now, there is a push to automation, and even drive-thrus have been outsourced to call centers. They're not all in India. Some of them are in America, but they're in states like Arkansas where you pay your people next to nothing compared to other places in America. the whole point is, though, to my point earlier, is like it didn't always used to be like that. Like corporations used to value their employees. Now that's a much harder problem to fix, and I don't know. You've got to be real careful about trying to change hearts and minds with legislation. But that's the issue we need to resolve here as a people, as a nation, is to get back to the mindset of being in this together and not being us versus them. And homeboy from Hardy's argument is the epitome of that. Like what he's not saying, but is accepting their face value, is that there are a class of people who don't deserve to be paid enough to get by, and in this case, it's kids. And so he's saying, kids, if we raise the minimum wage, these people are going to come for your jobs that are horrible right now and worthless. That's what's implicit in what he's saying, is that the jobs these kids are working right now are horrible jobs that are only for people that don't matter. Back in the day, a kid worked a minimum wage job after high school or whatever because he could pay for his college with it. Now a kid works a minimum wage job where if he's lucky, he can pay rent in his rent-controlled apartment and get by, without going homeless or whatever. And like that's a completely different mindset. So the guy is arguing against himself, or he's not arguing against himself, but indicting himself without even realizing it.
Right. And one thing that nobody has mentioned yet actually is the cost on the taxpayer for people. I mean, because these people that are working for the minimum wage and are not earning a living wage, they're going on government assistance. So that's really sort of an important point to point out. And I'm assuming this guy is doesn't really care too much about helping, give government assistance, right? Well, my tax money shouldn't go to those poor people. So that's just something to really kind of consider. But let's, in the interest of being super fair and balanced, I know, irony, let's end with Sean.
Yeah, I was
kind of outnumbered.
I was doing the crime of looking up statistics during the parts where I wasn't talking, and Canada does have a high youth unemployment rate, and
correct. But look at the education rates for that too. Most of our unemployment are for people with higher education because because the higher paying jobs don't want to hire those youth because they think they're too uneducated. They're going to leave those jobs shortly thereafter. I would know. I'm in that boat, Sean. I'm well aware of this fact.
Well, my point was that minimum wage disproportionately affects youthful and unskilled workers. That was my argument, and you're just saying that.
But that's not why they don't want. That's not why they don't want to hire young people. They don't want to hire young people because they're worried they're going to leave for another job. It's something to do with how much they're paying them.
Because they have no experience, and nobody wants to invest that much money into a worker that they don't think that doesn't have any experience.
But again, it's not the people without experience that they don't want to hire. It's the people with lots of experience they don't want to hire because they have lots of experience, because they think they're going to go for a different job soon. That's why. It's not the people who don't have experience. They will hire those people to the ends of the earth because they know we're the only shot these people have, and they're not going anywhere. That's why they'll hire those people. They won't hire the higher educated and the more experienced ones because they know that they might have other options. So we don't want to risk that. We don't want to take the time to train them and then have them leave.
Does Canada also build time machines? Because it sounds like your economy is based on paradoxes where you hire people with less experience for some reason, with no experience, more than people who are qualified. I don't understand that.
If I find an answer for you, I'll
happily.
about
minimum wage. We're talking about minimum wage jobs, guys, like fast food jobs.
Yeah. Hold on. I can stop the argument because I speak Sean. I know what's going on here. I get what Sean's missing, and it's a fair point to Sean. Well, Nick is lumping in education with experience. He's equating those two. So whenever he's saying they don't want to hire the experienced people, he's saying that's why kids can't get the job because kids are educated. And in Nick's argument, education equals experience, Sean. So he's not saying that kids are more experienced and old people are less experienced. That would be crazy. What he's saying is, I think the word he's looking for is qualified. And the kids that are having a hard time getting jobs are the educated, qualified kids because they have the ability to jump to the better jobs.
Correct. That's exactly my point.
We should move forward, even though the youth unemployment statistic is from 16 to 24, and then I don't know any 16-year-olds with college education.
All right. Well, we'll address it on another show, on another panel. You're right. We do have to move on because we have to go to Benghazi.
Benghazi!
How much will the... Yeah, I know. Benghazi. How much will the special investigation into Benghazi cost you this year? According to an analysis by Think Progress, more than at least 9 other important committees. Well, first, how much? How much is the House Benghazi panel estimated to spend? Well, they're estimated to spend just over $5.5 million. Okay, so what about the other committees? Obviously, they're not important, right? At least compared to Benghazi, which was a serious attack on our consulate. Now, here's the spending broken down by a committee. There's the Committee on Rules that got almost $3 million. The Committee on Small Business, of course, Republicans love small business, right? Just under $3 million. The Committee on Ethics, which is laughable, just over $3 million. Veterans Affairs, just over $3 million. The Committee on Intelligence, that's about $4.5 million. And it goes on and on. Surprisingly, the highest on there is the Committee on Space Science and Technology, with just over $5 million. Not bad. So anyway, you're probably saying, well, Jeff, we need to get to the truth about Benghazi. Well, nobody likes the truth more than we do. But these hearings aren't about the truth. These hearings are a witch hunt to go after President Obama and Hillary Clinton. Mainly because they want something to use against Clinton if she runs for president. They're scared of Hillary. And they should be. Actually, we should all be scared of Hillary, since she's probably more hawkish than John McCain. Nonetheless, the hilariously bad trailer for Innocence of Muslims video was part of the reason for the attack on Benghazi. So, Abu Khatala, for example, one of the guys, actually maybe the main guy, attributes the video as motivation for the attack in Benghazi. So, with that fact established, I just want to ask, how long do you think we're going to continue to do these investigations? And how much are they going to keep spending just to try and find something political to hit Obama and Hillary with? And what do you guys think?
Like, in general, if you're going to investigate something, right, and, like, you're seeking out justice and all that, like, I'm not going to get on you too much about the cost of that investigation. But, like, we already know pretty much what happened in Benghazi. Like, we don't need more committees, more hearings. And I will, again, break down everything that happened in Benghazi for everybody, just in case you weren't paying attention. Basically, we let the president start a war. He started bombing cities in Libya to get Gaddafi. The rebel force that we were helping was in the Benghazi area. So we set up a compound over there. It turns out, like all things turn out, that people that we help are later our enemies, and our ambassador got killed. But all these Republicans that didn't stop the president from bombing Libya really have no leg to stand on, because they are super hawkish and they wanted ground troops in there. So we always help the bad guys because they're going after the other bad guy, and then it turns out that the bad guys that we help don't like us either. The story of American foreign policy in the Middle East. So. Ta-da.
You are mostly correct, slightly incorrect, sir. You are mostly correct in that you're right that some of the rebels that we were helping turn on us. You are incorrect in that those rebels were then ousted by the rest of the rebels, who were then displaying signs saying, America, we didn't do it. We're not, they don't represent all of us. This was a fringe group. So it's not that all the bad guys turn against us. It's a small component does, which doesn't change the problem that oftentimes the people we help do turn against us. But it's just a slight caveat or a slight amendment to your story there, that it was a small component, radical component, that had previously been aligned with us and then turned and attacked our consulate, and then was repelled and driven out of the city by the rest of the rebels. So just that amendment there.
All right. I'm going to go to Becca, who's probably got some facts.
Actually, I don't have as many facts on this one. I'm so sorry. Except that I got really interested because, seriously, like, what is this money going to, right? It's going to be $5 million by the end of the year at least, and they're expecting the investigation to go on into next year. For a 12-person committee, this seems moderately excessive. And the things that they're telling me the money is going to it's what's really confusing to me. Salaries for staff, technology, IT support, publications, and document management for things that obviously they don't want to become public knowledge. I don't understand how that costs an additional $5 to $6 million when the committee salaries are already being paid. We know that they have interns there to do things for them. Now, document management, yes, this is important, but can it realistically cost $5 to $6 million when those infrastructures must already be in place? I agree that it's mostly a witch hunt, but that's from my political perspective. It's not that I have a problem, well, I have a problem with the investigation happening at all. But if someone thinks it's important, that's one thing. Spending $6 million on it for no real reason, that's a bigger problem to me.
Well, no cost is too high for getting truth in Benghazi. At least that's ask any Republican, and that's what they'll tell you. Jordan.
Yes, Becca just blew the lid off the story here and broke some news. This is another example of basically war profiteering, except on the investigative side. Like, these Republicans are hiring their contractor buddies to go investigate this. Like, there's private investigators being involved in all this, and they're part of it. That's where this money is going. Because, like Becca pointed out, the people on the committee, their salaries are already paid. They're not part of the cost. But the staff that they bring in and the consultants that they bring in to find the truth are making money hand over fist. I also, Jeff, I don't think that this is completely about getting President Obama and Hillary. Well, obviously I don't, because I just said it's also about the money. But it is also about, or it's only about getting Hillary politically. This is not, like, they lump Obama in just because they have to do that to get traction and keep this relevant before the 2016 election. But this is totally, totally about Hillary. And in their defense, if there is someone who probably should answer for some buffoonery, it is Hillary. One thing that these many, many investigations that have unearthed the truth about Benghazi have unearthed is that there was a lot of government incompetence there. There was no conspiracy, but there were some examples of bad government management, and that would fall under the purview of the State Department. So there's that. But no, this is totally a witch hunt for Hillary because she's beaten every potential Republican in every poll, which is really, really damning for what the Republicans have to say, because there's just not a lot of excitement about Hillary and the Progressive Party or progressive side of the political parties. And then
really
the last little take I want to do, there shouldn't be. No, she's not. I mean, it's going to be really difficult for me to vote in 2016, but that's another story. I don't want to get sidetracked. I just want to point out to do a little callback and tie this into a previous story. The committee immediately beneath this one in funding is the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. So that's like investigating Benghazi and having the 13th hearing on Benghazi financially is more important in Washington than science, space, and technology. And that's why our legislators get up there and say Guam's going to tip over and Mars is the same temperature as the Earth and dinosaurs died, which was somehow relevant to the conversation. Also, agriculture, veterans affairs. I mean, come on, this is what our politicians value more. They've got science, learning, our veterans, and our food. Less important than Benghazi. And then final point, even the exorbitant amount of money they're spending, even that is tilted unfairly to where the Republicans, who are obviously going to be coming after Hillary and Obama and propagating the conspiracy, have managed to rig this to where they get a substantial amount of money, more than the Democrats, who are obviously going to be in it to defend it. And that makes me mad all the way around because, one, nobody's in it for the truth. The truth has been determined. What they're in it for is to win this campaign. And what we know about American campaigns, with the exception of Eric Cantor, is whoever has the most money wins the publicity campaign, and that's all this is. And they've stacked the deck, man. They've got more money So as stupid and as much they beat us over the head with Benghazi, it's probably going to get traction because the money's there, and that's what counts.
Right.
See,
All right,
hey,
Sean.
can I? Okay.
I just want to throw in like what the conspiracy of Benghazi is. Like it's that Susan Rice deliberately misled the American people when she went on Sunday talk shows because of electoral reasons. That's probably true. Like in all seriousness, like let's keep it real. Like the president was up for re-election. They had information that this might have been pre-planned, but they wanted it to seem spontaneous and that they couldn't predict it. And Hillary Clinton didn't want to go out on TV and lie or be misleading or say things that would later turn out to be questionable. So she said she was too tired to go on the Sunday talk shows because she was running for president. Like politically, we understand what happened, right? In the quote-unquote conspiracy. But that is like the least big deal thing in American politics ever. Everybody spins everything to benefit themselves. Like,
No, that's not really the entire conspiracy. You know, there's
what I'm
things
saying, but that's the reality. That's the
down
real
orders and.
But that's the real, of all the conspiracies that they have, that's the most true one. That they spun it.
So you're trying to say if there was a conspiracy, that would be it.
No, but I'm saying that's the most true one, is that but it's not even a conspiracy. Like, it's the most obvious thing ever. If you're observing American politics, and the head of the State Department doesn't make a statement when she should have, because she's gonna run for president, like, you have a pretty good idea that they sent Susan Rice out there to take the heat for saying things that would probably be questionable later. Like, that's what happened. Like, there was some political motivations in the talking points, but that's not a criminal act. Like, that is politics 101. You spin things. So, like, the idea that we're having but I'm saying the idea that we're having investigations over things that are common sense, like, from a political standpoint, like, we don't need an investigation to tell us that. Like, it makes perfect sense. Hillary Clinton wanted plausible deniability. Barack Obama wanted plausible deniability. Wow.
And now the Republicans want a scandal in order to,
That's not a scandal in American politics.
Look, this whole thing is just politics. It's politicians playing dirty politics, and that's all it really ever is. That's about it.
And one more thing about the cost of the committee. Like, this is the same government that has, like, breakfast and somehow managed to spend $17 per muffin at a breakfast.
The muffin thing was the muffin thing. The muffin thing isn't true. Come on.
Whatever.
Like, the muffin thing has been it's for the whole breakfast. It was for the whole breakfast.
Coffee pots.
Come on, dude. You're gonna bring up Muffin Gate? Are you fucking serious?
First of all, I disagree.
Come on, Sean.
I disagree with you.
You're smarter than me.
The coffee pots that we send over to our soldiers in Iraq cost like $5,000 each. It's a fucking coffee pot that costs like $80. Like, we overpay for everything, is my point.
Yeah, okay, so we do overpay for things, like the bags of saline that are like, $20 or something like that. I get it. We do overpay for things. But you're gonna go after the muffin? Are you serious? It's not always. It's not always crazy as the Republicans and the right wing like to point out. But as for the spending, it just seems like it's wasteful spending on an issue we already pretty much know what happened, and it's just politics and politicians playing politics with our money, and that's really shitty. So.
Okay, I want to jump in on this now.
All right. Last comment.
Okay.
And then we'll move on.
I'm going to kind of disagree with Jordan at this point. I think it's all money. I don't think it's even about the politics anymore. I think it's all about the contractors that they're hiring out for the investigation. Politically, Benghazi, mind you, I'm in Canada, so my opinion is a little slanted here because I'm not really watching Fox or following that as closely. But Benghazi doesn't seem to be really much of an issue that gets too much traction anymore. It just seems like Republicans rabble-rousing and trying to generate something, and maybe like one or two people will listen every now and then, but for most people I don't think it really means anything anymore. I just think it's this thing and that they don't even care anymore. So I think it's moved past that point at this point. I think it's just about the money. Anyway.
All right. So now we go to our final story of the night. There's actually some good news from across the pond. I wish we had our British correspondent, Stephen, who's off until September. We're going to be talking about the BBC. How do they handle climate deniers? Now, in an effort to take the lead against inaccurate reporting, the BBC examined their news coverage and recently released a report called the Trust Report. Now, the Trust Report was designed to examine the network's impartiality in science coverage. The whole goal was pretty much to stay neutral on critical issues in order to stay actually fair and balanced, not Fox News fair and balanced. Well, in America, like I said, that fair and balanced means giving both sides of the debate, regardless of which side actually has facts. So it's giving them equal balance, right? And that's, of course, wrong. Now, that's why you see Bill Nye arguing scientific facts against a Heritage Foundation economist. Now, somehow, we in America consider that a valid debate. That's insanity. All right, so back to the BBC. So what is the BBC doing now that they've released their Trust Report? Well, one of the points mentioned in the Trust Report is that same issue, the very issue of false balance, false equivalence. Now, a scientist says this, a climate skeptic says that, you decide who's right. Well, the BBC has decided to end that practice by curbing the amount of airtime given to people with anti-science viewpoints. Finally. In the Trust Report, it stated that, quote, science coverage does not simply lie in reflecting a wide range of views, but depends on the varying degree of prominence such views should be given. Now, this basically means that in order to be actually balanced, you need to have a lot more scientists on to counter the other side, and news organizations in America are simply not doing that. Remember, 97% of climate scientists agree climate change is happening. So for an actual balanced debate, you have to do what John Oliver did, actually, on his show. Get a whole bunch of scientists in a room to debate two guys who don't believe in climate change. Or you could do what the BBC is doing and drastically limit the amount of airtime anti-science people get. Now, hold on. Okay, so before the YouTube comments blow up about how the BBC is crushing dissenting opinion, they're actually not. Now, the Trust Report states, the Trust would also like to reiterate that this does not mean that the critical opinion should be excluded, nor does it mean that scientific research shouldn't be properly scrutinized. That's very important. The BBC has a duty to reflect the weight of scientific agreement, but it also should reflect the existence of critical views appropriately. Audiences should be able to understand from the context and clarity of the BBC's output what weight to give to critical voices. So it's actually representing scientific consensus versus the critics. To me, this seems like they're actually trying to be really fair and balanced. If you have the facts and almost the entirety of the scientific community on your side, you should get more coverage, not less. Now, for me, this is something I think our media in America needs to look at doing. What do you guys think? And let's start with Jordan. Putting you on the spot.
All right, there we go. I had to unmute. I'm all for it as long as there's the understanding that like it's during the actual news shows. And I'm gonna go ahead and profess my ignorance here. I'm not familiar enough with BBC programming to know how much news and how much commentary they have. And we have the opposite problem here in America, especially on Fox, where news and commentary bleed over. And Shep Smith's show is about the only show that comes close to being a news show on Fox. Everything else is just commentary that either pretends it's commentary or is honest about the fact that it's commentary.
It's more like propaganda, but still.
Okay. I'm trying to trying to not use the heavy language, but yeah, you're right. I can't argue with you. But that's I don't know why it sucks that we have to. And by we, I mean people across the pond. We can't even get to this step yet. This is too much for us, and we have to launch a study to point out the fact that maybe we're giving pseudoscience a little bit more credence than it deserves. Now, again, in the commentary shows and the talk shows, if the host wants to do that, I'm all for artistic freedom and, you know, like freedom of expression, and let them do their shows the way they want to do it. You know, don't dictate from the top down. We criticize Fox all the time for dictating an agenda from the top down. But for a network to come along, especially my understanding is, you know, the BBC gets a lot of public funding, for a network to then come and say, hey, whenever you're presenting the news, you should probably do it with a healthy dose of reality. That's a good thing, all right? That's not stifling any First Amendment right. That's not, you know, crushing expression or creativity. That's just common sense, man. And you know, bravo on the BBC for doing this.
For sure.
So I want to.
Oh.
Okay. I did want to go next, but if Becca wants to go, she can go.
All right. Go ahead, Nick.
Okay. I actually wanted to kind of respond to something Jordan said. I sort of disagree about the talk show point, that because I see far too much pseudoscience slipping through the cracks on talk shows. Oprah's a great example. She gave frickin' Dr. Oz a show. Dr. Oz has been a massive pusher of homeopathic and alternative medicine remedies, which he was just brought to Congress a couple weeks ago to testify, and he said there that they're not science. They're not confirmed.
Crap.
He believes they're true, but they're not confirmed. There's no science to back them up. But people will take their advice because they're on TV and they're popular and they're famous. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't have the right to bring these people on, but they should. I feel like if they're that popular, there should be a degree of accountability for what they do, because these people do have tremendous effects on people's lives. This isn't like just like some random talk show that has no one watches. These were massive talk shows that everyone followed, that almost everyone watched, and pseudoscience flourished in them. Like Christ, they just fired Jenny McCarthy from The View. Finally, the frickin' leader of the anti-vax movement was finally fired from The View just now, just a week ago. Like, these people have tremendous influence, and they do affect lives. They cost lives even. People have died because of them. Not indirectly, of course, and you can't really prove it, but because some of these movements have picked up, these anti-vax and these pseudoscientific movements picked up, the people have suffered from that. So I would even venture to say that if you're a major talk show, you better have someone with actual scientific credence on to fact check these people. Now, to the actual heart of the issue, the actual article, I think what the BBC's done is fantastic. I can't stand when opinion pieces and I don't even want to call climate denial pseudoscience anymore. It's not science. It's just denial, period. Denialism, a voice. It doesn't have any place in news. It has no place in fact. It has no place in reality. It should barely have a place on talk shows and opinion pieces.
All right.
But it does, and that's fine.
Jordan.
Done. Go.
All right, Jordan wants to pop in real quick. So.
Yeah, Nick, man, I totally hear what you're saying, man. But I would then push back, and of course, there's really no way to know this without letting it play out. But like, if you give, you know, the creative, you know, expression and freedom to the talk shows and whatnot, maybe those people do, you know, come on every now and then. But as long as the people who are, you know, known to be reporting facts and news are reporting facts and news, then it's much more acceptable for somebody else in that talk show to stand up and say, no, that's crazy as hell. What is wrong with you, you idiot? Whereas whenever you have the news people buying into the same and giving credence to the same craziness you see on the talk shows, it makes the people in the talk shows that much more that much more credible and lets it, you know, gain that much more traction. But again, that's speculation on my part. I don't know of any data to back that up.
Right.
Just a brief point, then we'll go to the people. Jordan, I just want to say, if that's the case, I'll gladly compromise with you on that and say if the news has that effect on the talk shows, happy to compromise on. Okay, I'm done.
All right, Becca, you ready to chime in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. One, I really do think that fake science is incredibly dangerous because the people who buy into it often aren't actually paying attention to the real news, and more importantly, and this is something that I deal with every single semester as a teacher, people who haven't been trained in it or who don't just have an interest in it are incredibly lazy about research. And it's not intentional. They just don't know. They don't know how to go to good sources. And so I end up with, for example, sites that have a clear ideological slant, including frequently sites that are clearly crafted to be against, for example, Muslims, or also really often gay people. And my students have cited them, not realizing, not even having enough of a filter to realize that that's what they're doing. And so that's where it gets so dangerous, because people don't know how to tell the difference. They really don't, and they don't know who to go to for these reliable answers. And so that laziness becomes so much more than just laziness. The other thing that I want to note, though, is a couple of other really good things that the BBC Trust Report was focusing on. It wasn't just this argument that giving equal time to two views that are not equally scientifically valid are false balance. It was also that they should be providing more commentary from women, acknowledging that part of that was a lack of balance in the profession, but that despite that, they needed to be hearing more of those voices, because of course that's the kind of bias that then leads to young girls less getting into science. And also that they needed to cite research from more sources, from more universities particularly. And so essentially across the board, they're saying, here's how we can be more balanced. I think that information is important for anyone who might misconstrue the report as being just an attack on people who aren't falling in line with the real science. Because people do have this misconception that science is a belief system. And it's really not how it works, but once they're thinking like that, they view scientific fact as an attack. That's not what this report was about. This report was about, here are the numbers. Here's what we need to do to change the numbers to be more reliable as a news source.
Right, and I think those are good, really good points too. And you know, with the internet, of course, there's a huge deluge of information, and of course, people take advantage of that to put their ideological, spins on things that are not representative of the facts. And so that's why you've got like info wars and shit. You know what I mean? Just spreading all sorts of like BS. And there's even, there's people on the left, the anti-vax movement, and to a certain point, the GMO movement. Now, that's not to say that I love Monsanto or we love Monsanto, but we've been doing genetic modification of our food forever, and you can't you don't want to let it get past a certain point where they start putting like horrible stuff in it, but the science itself is sound. But anyway, enough about that. Let's go to Sean.
Yeah, in general, I don't agree with banning people because they have opposing views and all that. And
No, they didn't ban them. They reduced the airtime.
That's what are you doing? Like, calm down. In general, I don't agree with banning people who don't like agree with you or whatever. But that's not what BBC is doing, Jeffrey. They're actually trying to give proportional time to theories that are like based on the soundness of the science, which I think pretty much makes sense. Like I don't have any like real problem with it. I would much rather have when they have somebody that's not saying truthful things for the host to also say, well, actually this study proves that you're totally making shit up and stuff like that. So I would like that. Like I don't want it to be a straight-on debate atmosphere during a show. Like a separate debate is totally fine with me. Like the Ken Ham, Bill Nye thing, that's totally fine because that's separately a debate. But I don't want that to be like every TV show. It's like this scientist said this. This person who's not a scientist, but I'm not going to tell you that they're not a scientist, says this. You decide. Like I would like them to clearly like point out who they're having on, and they can limit them in any way that makes sense. I just don't agree in general with banning. And the thing is there's like the scientific debate on climate change isn't really about what the cause is among the scientific community. Like the debate is like there is scientific debate on solutions. So I would hope they would focus more on the solutions debate rather than this old, is climate change happening? What's the temperature of Mars? Yada yada yada, like stuff like that.
It's cold out.
Yeah. So I just wanted to be like I'm pretty much in agreement with what BBC is doing. for the most part. Like, I just want them to be journalists. Like, more than limiting people, I would rather them just be journalists and go after people that are not telling the truth.
There you go. And I think that's what we all want our journalists to do. And that's, once again, the problem here in America. Our journalists aren't really doing a great job, well, on corporate media. Because, you know, corporate media is obviously, it's owned by a few large multinationals that pretty much all care about money. I'm getting paid, and getting paid by the fossil fuel industry. So there you have it.
I just want to briefly clarify my point too, because Sean brought it up, and so I think it might be necessary that I do agree with Sean in the part that, like, for example, the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate. I was also fine with that as well. I don't mind it being in that sort of atmosphere. It's just on major televised networks, talk shows, anything like that, where if you're gonna bring a pseudoscientist on, or someone, pseudoscientist makes it sound like it's an actual fucking term. A crack dealer, or
to argue about climate change?
A snake oil salesman on, then the host had better call them on their horse shit. Please. Okay, I'm done.
All right, does anybody have any final points they want to make?
Yes. Don't trust Dr. Oz. Like, those guys are all being paid by people that are trying to sell you vitamins or prescription drugs or whatever kind of bullshit. Like, you need to know that those guys are entertainers, and even though they may technically have medical degrees, they probably shouldn't have. Because the real degree that they need is a business degree, because they're fucking selling you on some bullshit.
All right. With that, I think we'll wrap up the show. Thank you, everybody here for watching the live stream here on TYT Community. Make sure to join us tomorrow night when we talk social justice issues in the Social Justice Hour. I'm once again filling in for my vacant co-host, Rhiannon Avenine, while she saves up for a new computer. So hopefully she'll be back one of these days. If you guys want to join the panel, because yes, we accept people from the audience to be on our panels. By the way, everybody here, including me, is a fan. So you guys can join the panel as well by emailing me or going to our Facebook page. My email is jeffw@tytnetwork.com, or you can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/tytnation or TYT Community. And you can also go to Becca's Facebook page for Team Rainbow Dress. That's, what is it, facebook.com/Team Rainbow Dress? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And make sure to help out Becca by going there and liking her page as well. And if you want to help us here on TYT Community, you can donate to TYT Nation by going to patreon.com/TYT Nation. No, I don't make very much money from this, so we pretty much get by on donations right now because YouTube money sucks. So I want to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight, of course. Nick, Jordan, Sean, the regulars, and Becca for joining us. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you for joining. And we really appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure to watch us tomorrow. And if you're interested in seeing more of me, I'll be on Ron Placone's live stream on Monday at noon. I'll be joined by Dan Spear and Ron Placone. We're going to have an interesting talk. It's going to be fantastic. I'll link that up on my Facebook page so you can watch us have an excellent discussion. And other than that, you can join us next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, here on TYT Nation. All right. I'm out, you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.
Good night. God bless.
Good night. See you later.